Hello and welcome to Nerdarchy. For nerds, by nerds, I'm Nerdarchy Dave, and today I am joined by this nerd.
Nerdarchy Ted, how are you doing this fine and lovely evening, sir?
I'm doing good, man. You kind of suggested tonight's topic based off of our recent game where we wrapped up Shadow of the Demon Lord, and
Indeed.
I liked it. I thought it was a great idea, and so we're gonna get into talking about death tonight, but not in the way you might think. We're gonna be talking about not necessarily character death or dying in D&D or RPGs, but death as a concept, as an entity.
Yeah, capital D death. Although, character death is something that is always going to be related, to that kind of concept. So like I'm certain that, is not out of the realms of topics of conversation as we, weave through the mysteries of the personality of death.
So I guess let's start off with like what inspired you from that game to come
Sure.
up with this topic.
So we were playing it's like a 14 or 15 session story arc of this game, so too much to get into all of it, but the initial premise started off with uh when things died they were coming back as undead, and we were investigating what brought about it. Fast forward all these sessions later, we are standing before the doors to the underworld, and they are bound shut, and we did some investigating and found that the doors being barred shut were preventing souls from leaving this world, which was leading to these undead arising. So, as we investigate further, we found that death was literally behind these doors and was like pounding at them, enraged that it could not come out and collect souls as it is wont to do. Now, we know that Dave is very much a character um, at the table and loves to just move the story forward, does not have the same uh, desire for character life that yours truly does. I'm not one to usually make the sacrifice play. But there was something about it being a finale, it being this moment here that I'm like, oh, I'm going to go forward and I'm going to offer myself up to death to save the rest of my party. And that's, how things started off. It definitely didn't end that way, but opened the doors, death came out charging, and I was prepared to just lay my life on the line to, appease death. But my death was not going to appease death.
Give it a soul to reap, and also there was a question on whether or not your character actually had a soul or not.
I'm pretty sure after everything we've done, he's got us.
Yeah, wow. Me and Fizz were not quite convinced. We were debating it as you were giving your epic speech. So, Ted was playing a changeling in Shadow of the Demon Lord, and basically they're like golems made of rocks, sticks, and mud.
Yep.
That that have been magically created by the Fae, right? And
Right.
that's why we were debating whether or not they would have a soul or not. But that being said, right, like you said, like uh, your your idea of death in this campaign was, oh, like we have to appease death because we need death to do what death does and reap souls and
Right.
basically reset the natural order. And you kind of misunderstood how it works in Shadow of the Demon Lord, or perhaps like as the GM was running things, and the way it was being run was, there's not a singular death. There are many deaths, and they go out and they
Right.
reap souls, and they basically have a job. They punch the clock, they go in, reap some souls, go, then they get off and go back to their wife and families. Not really, but they're like kind of like angels in this world. And it's kind of similar to how they are in like Supernatural, if you're familiar with the Supernatural fandom or show. It's very much like that because some of us are like, well, screw it, we'll just kill death. So you've entered even where death may die, and then that'll solve that problem. But Ted's thinking of like the whole world. They're like, no, but then the undead will keep raising, and no one will reap the souls. But it turns out there's like a whole union of death, so it wasn't really that big a deal. if we killed just this one. Um, but it brought us to like greater questions for your D&D game, and whatever TTRPGs you're playing, that might have death as an entity, and like which version would would you use, and what how could you use it in your game, and how might that um how might that lead to more adventures and quests for some noble heroes to go upon. So I think we can like explore both avenues of
Mhm.
of death as an entity in a game and what we can do with it.
So for starters, while there is a god or goddess of death in in campaign worlds and for whatever, and we even have the death domain that clerics can opt to use. I mean, I'm playing a death cleric in Curse of Strahd, so it's a whole thing that we already know is out there. So, like, what would the relationship be between the deity of death and an avatar of death, the thing that goes out and collects the souls? I think could be a whole nother, question or possible thread to dive into with this.
Well, sure, yeah, sure. Like a deity could have a multitude of avatars, right? And they
Mhm.
actually, and I guess that was really introduced in third edition, right? Where they stated the gods, but they weren't actually stating the gods. It was the avatar. Like you couldn't really kill the god per se. All you could do is destroy its avatar, which would come back. And
Right.
depending on the power level of deity, they might have tons and tons of these avatars, so they can literally exist in multiple places at once. Not at the full power of a god, but super supremely powerful being all the same.
Right.
So where do you want to start?
That is that. I'll let you decide. I came up with the topic. You guide us.
Okay. So, all right. So we have three different paths, right, to choose from here, kind of. And at first, my first thought was, looking at deaths as not a singular entity, but many entities that go out, and maybe they actually all work for the gods of death, right, and
Hmm.
kind of do their bidding. Um, and so I was like, well, what could we use the stats that already exist? So my first thought was to go to the skull card of the deck of many things, and I
Yep.
quickly realized they were not as cool. Death was not as cool as I remembered them from earlier editions. Matter of fact, that death is a bit of a weenie.
100%. I went straight and looked at D&D Beyond and just looked up death and looked for avatar, and there it's technically even less useful because it comes up with a singular hit point. So
Yeah,
unless you're planning to use poison and necrotic only, death is the avatar of death is an absolute pushover.
yeah. And
We
when
wound
you,
up
I was just gonna say, when
got
you actually read the description for the magic item, it doesn't get a whole lot better. It's only half the hit points of the summoner, so it's not really truly a threat. Now, that aside, like you could always come up with some other stats and figure that out without too much trouble. Um, but I think the greater question is like, how would it interact with the gaming world? How would you use it, from the player side and from the DM side? I like the idea of doing something where either something is killing deaths, right? And maybe
mhm.
there's a bunch of them, but maybe that number is finite. Or maybe it's not finite, but whoever is destroying them is actually like absorbing their power. Which in turn can eventually become a problem. And maybe they're working toward like a greater goal of trying to figure out how to absorb all these entities of death, and become this like uber threat to your campaign world. Maybe to rival the gods themselves. So it could be like a murder mystery, but like who's killing death?
Yeah, I mean that in and of itself could have, some serious planar consequences and could really, be a great game for some upper level characters because it's like, all right, you have to deal with things that are powerful enough to destroy these avatars, whether they're, finding a way to summon them and, what what methodologies are being used for that. There's so many things, and then of course, like, all right, if they're absorbing the powers of death, like, what kind of soul magic are they dealing with, or have they learned that they would be then turning against the players? You could create, a whole new sphere of magic to, really upset the balance of the world. Uh, that
I I
possibly
really
was only. God,
I really like to start small with things a lot of times and then kind of like work my way out. So
right.
for me, like my thoughts are like for like introducing the concept of death. Death is dying. Deaths are dying. They're
Hmm.
being stalked. They're being hunted. And the way I would go about it, I would have a bunch of strange events happen in a location, because maybe what happens when a death dies, especially just before they're about to perform their duties, that
Hmm.
person doesn't die even though they were supposed to.
Right.
Like, you have people falling out of, off the top of the buildings, or getting run over by wagons, or some other way thing that should have been fatal and should have killed them, and they don't die. Maybe they even have the grievous wound still, but they're not dying, right? So, and there's a series of these that are happening. So now,
Right.
like that's what I would use as the catalyst to investigate,
Hmm.
like what's going on, and the fact that death is dying.
Yeah, I mean, that would be a great start, to it being a mystery. And then as you begin getting clues, like, you could still be, chasing down these things and picking up more clues, and possibly maybe not so much saving people's lives, but trying to restore normalcy, because it's definitely not good to be like, oh yeah, I've got a sword run through me. I should be dead, but I'm not. How kind of like mental trauma is that? What is that going to do for the people around? Like, you know, if you don't have access to, like, serious healing magic, like, closing up a fatal wound is, you know, not exactly something that the average doctor is going to be able to do.
Or you can even do something kind of like comical. Like, I
Hmm.
mean, like the first thing that kind of pops into my head is um someone that's working near like a mill grist that's powered by a windmill,
Hmm.
and like their clothing snags on the windmill, and it just like lifts them into the air and then slams them into the ground. But it
Oh,
keeps
jeez.
doing it over and over, and they're just like stuck because it should have killed them the first time.
Right.
But like, I'm just picturing a scene where the players like wander onto this and they see it happen, and like they're like, this commoner should have been dead like 5 times over, and it just keeps repeating itself because he's stuck on the windmill.
That's harsh.
Or maybe like a rampaging bull or something like that, and it just keeps getting flung, in the air from the horns or something. Yeah, give him more time, probably think it's something better. But that
Yeah,
is
but
how I would
those
want
are
to
still
introduce
pretty
it.
horrific.
Yeah, I would want it to be like horrific and gruesome, but also kind of funny.
You got to make sure that you know your players before you do like that kind of thing, because not everybody's going to handle things the same way. I mean, you and I have been gaming for long enough to know how things are going, and yeah, I can see that mindset for us, sure, but it's always a tread carefully with these kind of things.
Well, it's like anything. Like, always, you need consent. You need to, basically,
Use your tools.
your tools. The session zero. This is stuff that would have kind of been figured out. Um, so that's like one idea for like the kind of like the multitudes of deaths, like the Death Stalker. Um, what about the singular entity of death?
So, that I feel is like a little bit harder to look at, and like, I feel that is far closer to more deific levels of power, and it would be a lot harder to chase down and do anything too, because like, it would have to be as powerful as, you know an actual avatar of a god, if its sole job is to reap the souls of the dead, and it's singular, that means if something were to happen to it, like until a new one is drafted in whatever way it would, everything is immortal. And that just absolutely upsets the balance of power in the world and changes an awful lot of things.
So I look at it from like a different, like you could do a couple different things with it, and I feel like I'm probably just ripping this off from someplace, but that's okay.
Sure, but
That's how I
well,
do it in a lot of my games anyway, right?
sure.
Um, yeah. What if like the singular entity of death just got sad, right? Like they're just tired of everybody hating them because they're death and they're the end of things, and they just decided to quit. And then like you had all of these bad things that begin happening, like death. One of the things that death does is basically end suffering, right? Because that's the only thing that's left now. And so you would still have these problems. What if the players had to like track down death and convince death to come back to work and make death
Uh,
unsad and make them see like all the good they actually do, despite the fact that you know they're not well liked.
sure. And you can draw some inspiration from the Lucifer television show or like the old Hercules Disney movie where like, Hades doesn't want to be in the underworld anymore or Lucifer doesn't want to be in the underworld anymore. Like I feel like those has some good mindset and conversation pieces that you could kind of like, pick up and play with. And obviously, Lucifer is a lot more serious. If you're looking to go, from a comedic standpoint, Hercules definitely has some angles to play with there. I feel I feel it would be pretty amusing to try to convince the players that, oh yeah, your quest is to go find Death and tell him to end his vacation.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like I think that would be absolutely fabulous to like get involved with combat that are like so outside their league that it's like, well, no one's coming to claim you. You have hit points. You can be below zero, but there's no death saving throws. There's no uh there's no dying because you can't.
I mean, you could do similar things with just like the entity being imprisoned, being banished. Like the quest could be to free it because maybe death is too powerful to actually be destroyed. Um,
Right.
or maybe death is destroyed, but you know, death is also about renewal and beginnings sometimes as well. So
Mhm.
perhaps like the death has a phoenix quality to it, and the players have to find that seed of the death that gets created when death dies in order to bring it back to the world and have it come to fruition and resume being death.
So like another direction on that is like what if you had to find either a mortal or an angel or somebody who was willing to take up the post. So sure you could go find the essence, but it has to be like instilled into a willing, you know, I hate to use the word victim, but a willing applicant to take on the role. I think that could
Sacrifice.
be you know that could be a lot of fun to just be like, all right, are they going to dupe somebody into taking it? Are they going to be completely open and honest about what they're offering? uh, what is the technicalities? Is it just here, we have this gift that somebody has to take, and upon taking it they become, or is it no, it's more of a contract where like full acknowledgement of the office, if you will, has to be kind of discussed and there to really be like, all right, this is the whole shebang. It's not a
No,
I got
it
you.
it works. It works like the Tim Allen Santa Claus movies. If you put on the robes, that's it. You're death now.
So I mean, you could again go with a very like super emotional, like heart-driven, storyline, or you could go with a very comedic aspect of like, all right, you know, death keeps dying, and we got to schlub this off on some, unwitting fool so that somebody does the job properly.
I'm also like kind of envisioning like the players holding tryouts or interviews for the because you need someone with the right temperament or qualities to take on the mantle of death. And
Sure.
like you get people like that show up that just has like a list of grudges against everyone that wronged them or perceived wronged them, throughout their lifetime, and be like, nope, you're off the list.
This is who I'm collecting first, and they just un unroll this scroll that's got 47,000 names on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna be busy. It's like, well, thanks. We'll consider your application.
Or you have one that's like, yes, I'm going to be taking fees and bidding for those who just want souls reaped for the right price. Basically, death just becomes a hitman. So I feel like you could
Or
definitely go in some like fun, ridiculous routes as well as the
I
serious
mean,
and
it could be the other way around as well. Like, all right, yeah, Death could be a hitman, but he could also be like bought off. Like, yeah, I'm
yeah,
not ready to leave this world. What's your price?
yeah.
Now I know I did not read the series,
Uh,
but I'm familiar with the author Piers Anthony. When I first got into reading novels, he was the first author that wound up grabbing me and getting me down this long rabbit hole. But he had a book series that was the incarnations of immortality. And my wife has gone through them. We have them in the house, and uh, I've I've debated reading them and just never got around to it. But one of the books is about death, and they treat like all of these, um, you know, they're all treated like they are people. They're like working in an office. So like you have this incarnation of death, like working this job, having to do all of these kinds of things. So you could very much take this entity in that kind of direction of like whether you're talking about the singular or whether you're talking about the many of like them having to like all right yep, I'm on the night shift tonight, guys, I gotta punch in and go go claim souls, and you know going through all of these kind of ridiculous aspects. um Far more, while the book is definitely more serious from my understanding, you could kind of bend and twist the hilarious concept to have these avatars having to like clock in to go reap souls. You could even
anytime
you
you
could even uh,
anytime you have anything like that and make it turn it into like office jokes, I think it's hilarious. I mean, me and Ryan had briefly entertained the idea of doing something similar, but with devils and
mhm.
hell, and like they're just clocking in, doing their job, tormenting and torturing people day in and day out. It all gets old after a while.
So like I was thinking that, related to the many, like there could be something that happens and the players wind up actually getting drafted and have to, for a time be part of this role where they're out collecting souls because whatever fits the campaign story. There wasn't enough people, and you know they're at the right place at the wrong time, or the wrong place at the right time. However you want to fathom it. Uh, but looking at it from that perspective, pulling in these players and having to have them conscripted to go out and possibly reap a soul of someone that they know, or someone that they've interacted with, all of the touching or crazy emotions that could get involved when they're doing this, and they're bound within the powers, like they have to do it. So
Well, that's also like a fun idea too. The idea that the adventurers, your adventuring groups gets conscripted to act as reapers with death for a time for whatever reason. Whatever, it doesn't really matter. But you could basically have a series of adventures, and maybe they don't have the powers of death, so they have to figure out how to reap the souls with whatever they have access. Uh,
hmm
so I like that idea when you can just give players problems to solve without necessarily
hmm
having the solution, and this could very much well be one of them where it's like you got to kind of act as the Grim Reaper, but you don't actually have any of the Grim Reaper's powers. How are you going to do this?
yeah, and that's the fun, and thankfully, we have solid groups that we play with. Again, only know how your players are going to act, and if to me, it's always good to have some kind of concept of a solution, but I'm usually open to, well, there might be other ideas that the players come up with that I'm willing to take as well,
Yeah,
just
like
to be on the safe side.
sometimes I don't actually come up with solutions, but other times it's very kind of loosey goosey in case they need help and they need to be
Right.
nudged a little bit, you know. But for the most part, even if I do come up with a solution, if they offer something up that I'm like, oh, that's pretty good, that'll work, or sometimes they just come up with a better idea than I actually had, and I'm like, well, I'm not going to chuck their better idea for mine just because I thought of it.
Right. And that's how I tend to have things go as well, because I find that that's far more enjoyable for me as a DM. Uh, because these games are collaborative. They're designed to be able to have lots of ideas, and to only have one thing work, that just gets frustrating, because what happens if, like, your really clever idea is awesome, but you know the players are all having an off day, and they're not seeing things from the same perspective or direction that you are, and it's like, oh well, no one's coming up with that, and then you have to, like, find a way to spoon feed them the answer,
Yeah.
and that's less fun for the players, it's less fun for you. um, so that's why I always like
Or
allowing the fun ideas to work.
or maybe there's a combination of like there is the uber entity of death,
Mhm.
but they don't actually do all the reaping. They actually have the reapers that they send out to do the reaping, right? And now I'm kind of envisioning like through some misunderstanding, the players kill one or more of the reapers,
Mhm.
thinking they're doing something heroic, but really they're just you know thwarting the forces of nature essentially and the universe.
Right.
So death is like that's how they become reapers, right? Like death is like, well, now we've avoided the fill. You guys kind of did the thing, so until we get this worked out, we're gonna need you to fill in. You're gonna have to temp.
The more we talk about this, the more things become spinning, and the more, like, ideas of how awesome this would be to run, like, a small story arc, um, with this kind of concept. I
Yeah.
think that would
So
be
so
utterly
Vaughn has a
hilarious.
question for us, and they've repeated it. I did see Vaughn. I
Uh-oh.
just hadn't gotten around to it yet. I know you guys do character builds, but do you do kits for second edition AD&D? Do you do videos on older versions of the game as well? We have not we've always moved forward with whatever the newest edition is. And if an edition came out that we just weren't feeling, we would just play different role playing games. Is kind of how we've done things. So at this point, I could not tell you anything about second edition. That is so far in my rearview mirror. Uh, well, I just know that Thacker was there, and it was a brutal and harsh times. And even when we've done videos to go back and kind of like compare different things and see how things worked, I'm like, oh wow, that was rough.
I remember the term kit, but I could not specifically state what exactly it was. I remember second edition characters that I've played, events that happened in the games that we played. Um,
The complete
you
handbooks, I
know,
think all of them were just basically a bunch of kits, and it was just like
uh,
variants on like core character classes.
so like I love the complete books. I've got most of, if not all of them that I could get my hands on, and I still have all of my second edition books. Some of them are scattered around the house at the moment. Um, but it's a scenario where like as Dave says, like we've moved on to where the game went. We started the group together as a second edition. We rolled into third, some of us kicking and screaming. Um, we tried out fourth, didn't really fit for us, so we moved into other games. We found fifth, when it was just launching, thought that it had the best of every edition, made some modifications, very minor tweaks to, fit our play style and some things that we liked, as most groups do. And now we're up in the air based on, where things are going with whether you call it 1D&D, 6th edition, 5.5. I don't even know if it's got a set thing, at this point in time, but we're not in love with it yet, so don't know what
So
we're going to do come future.
I feel like a lot of 5e like subclasses were actually inspired from different kits from AD&D. I mean, it might be
Okay.
fun for us to pull out some of those old books and take a look at kits and be like, oh, how would we re-envision this in 5e? I mean,
Sure.
just because that's the version of the game we play. I don't know if anyone would care, to be honest with you. Like it would probably be well above the heads of a lot of newer D&D players just because they've never played those editions, so it wouldn't mean anything to them.
So we've actually passed our halfway point, so I guess we should kind of point out, if you can't see from above our heads, that our live chat is powered by Easy Roller Dice. So check out the link and the promo code in the description down below to get your purchase, your first purchase with ERD for a decent discount. Easy Roller Dice is our favorite dice company, so you should support them, show some love, and tell them that Nerdarchy sent you.
So we have one more uh, way of looking at death, right? And that is
Sure.
through the avatars of the gods of death. Which in D&D you have plenty of them. Some of them are benevolent, some of them are malevolent, and some of them are neither, right? So, how might you use one of these in your games?
So first and foremost, I know you and I have a very different play style when it comes to character death, and I who get far more attached to my characters than you do, both as a player and a DM. If you've got a spot where it's not easy to either shoehorn in another character or have the character resurrected, when that character fails its last death save, or um, they've died from just massive damage, or they're dead from whatever. um, an avatar of death could show up, and there could be, whether it be a combat, a challenge, something is done, and the character is offered a second chance, but it comes back, maybe in some ways more powerful, in some ways less powerful. Like, maybe it's got, a floating hourglass, and you've got so much time. You've bought some time from death, but it's not going to be forever. And maybe only you see it, maybe your friends see it, and you can give them a little bit more time to play this character and either find a way to properly come back to life, which is not going to be the same because you're not really dead, or find another way to, convince death to give you more time. I think it could be like an ongoing thing of like, you know, the avatar of death shows up and is a reoccurring NPC to kind of like nudge and remind the player or players, like, all right, you you've got a job to do, or you've only got so much time left. Use it wisely, and it could like spur the game on to not have the unnecessary resting, or the laxical days goal. Let's go on a 4-hour shopping spree through town because I want to find the right backpack.
Is that your answer to defeating the shopping episode?
It's just one of the things that popped in my head. I could give two craps about whether players want to go on a shopping spree. If players are interested in role playing with each other or with NPCs, I'm cool for it. Like you know, I'm a easy going DM. But I know some DMs absolutely despise those moments where like things slow down and characters want to have those long-winded back and forths.
Although the shopping episode would be a great place to enter any of those scenarios, right? To like tip off with um, that there's a problem with death and people are not dying. Like it could be during said shopping trip that they encounter these weird occurrences where things happen that should have killed commoners, but they're just not dying.
There's always the aspect of uh and I know some people aren't into it, but like adventurers, while they're not uncommon, they are they're not the super common thing where like everybody has got all of this kind of power that can go out and stand up against the monsters of the world. So I always tend to, in some way, shape, or form, the player characters in my game are something special. Sometimes it's just, all right, you're special, and we don't need to get into the particulars of what that is. But sometimes they might all collectively be something special. And whether you look, oh, you're all born under a particular star, or you're all born on the same birth date, separated over, different years, centuries, decades, whatever have you, depending upon what race they are. Um, and that means something. But, whatever you tie it to, insert the ability that, all right, periodically throughout your life, you've seen this apparition when someone or something has died. And, oh, well, while you were young, you told people about it, and you people don't encounter death a lot. So it's not something that you would see super often. But all of a sudden, like now that you're out doing things, and you're killing monsters. Well, okay, you see that happen. Maybe people begin talking about it, and it's like, oh, that happened to you too. Oh, that happened to you too. So like that could be another way of bringing in the connection with death. And what does that mean for the greater story? What does that mean for these characters future?
So Ted, I know like a favorite thing of yours, especially the more you kind of read it, and we really got into this when we are talking about warlock and vocations, right?
Hmm.
Now, marry marry any of these concepts with true sight.
Okay. That's where things tend to get a lot more fun, because you start putting True Sight out there, and you get to, like, in my opinion, rewrite the world. Because I am definitely not one who gets, as they say, married to the material. I'm willing to make changes to make the game more interesting. And when players start using True Sight willy nilly, I tend to like, oh, well, the things that you've been interacting with that you thought were normal, well, maybe some of them are, maybe most of them are, but you know, that elf over there, that's not an elf. That's a dragon. Oh, that tiefling over there, that's a full-fledged demon, or, I went with obvious,
Yeah.
directions, but like they could easily be flipped. You put characters that the players have interacted with that have been for the most part benevolent, or neutral, and now all of a sudden, like, the players are looking at this as like, holy crap, these things are not what I thought they were. Oh God, what do I do? And when you start then putting that as, oh well, maybe there's somebody who is mortal, that's, or not mortal, but parading as mortal, that's operating within town, but is a straight up avatar of death, an agent that reaps souls. And there's something about this town that he's like, nope, I never leave this town. There's always somebody here that I am waiting to claim for one reason or another, and that could then get linked to a greater adventure. Like, I know, while it's not death related, Griffin Gaff had something about it that was special, that so many things were geared towards coming to that location, that we had 3 20th level campaigns at the same time based out of that freaking town, like that city. Like, what the hell, man? What was so special about it? So, like, you could have that kind of aspect happen, and maybe the avatar of death is not happy that it knows that, or that what it is, and that could be a serious problem for it and you, because it's supposed to work with anonymity.
So, what about from the player side, right? Do you have any thoughts on like how to incorporate some of these concepts or ideas for players to kind of like enhance the game, or maybe even something from like the beginning of a campaign?
So I look to, um there's both uh the barbarian path and the paladin oath that are kind of linked to the past life. I know, like, Oath of the Ancients is a little bit more fey, but like there's still a little bit of aspects to the past lives when you get into some of it. And then the path of the ancestral guardian, I think it is, for barbarian, where like you literally summon spirits. Like, you're freaking linked to death as as much as you can. um so, like, I think having characters that are all connected in some way, shape, or form to the afterlife, to death, because, like we said, there's a cleric one, there's a paladin one, there's a barbarian one, uh, there's a monk way of the shadow, there's a rogue, phantom. Like, there's plenty of death-based death-based subclasses that you can uh play with. Do we have a way of the long death in 5e
Yeah.
for monk?
Yep.
Okay, so you could go with that one. It's even more so than shadow. um and I feel like if you build off of the premise that all these characters are death based, and then you get into this whole death scenario, like, all right, we got the ultimate goth party going on here, let's do this. I think you could have a lot of fun and thematic things, where there's things about the past that these characters are looking to uncover, or that the uh that the world is trying to hide, and you need to make it not be hidden. I think there's some stepping stones there to play.
It kind of got me thinking too of like, if you're using Reapers in the game, and um, I just got distracted because Stefan just gave us a awesome sticker for $50. Much
Oh, sweet.
appreciated. Um,
Thank you, man.
I don't let's see. I don't see if there's a question or anything that's attached to it. But if there is stuff, and I got my eyes open, so just feel free to put it in there. But so like, what if like those type of characters that had spirit connections, um, like the barbarian path, right? That really kind of speaks of the ancestors. Like, what if a Reaper shows up and is like, you know what? These guys aren't really where they should be, and I'm going to have to recall them back to where they go. And you can kind of create whether it's a direct conflict or maybe a misunderstanding between how their ancestral path and their relationship with their ancestors work, and what the Reaper kind of sees as the rightful place for those that belong uh, in the afterlife. So I could see you can make some connections that way and creating kind of like unique and interesting encounters that are really based on a particular um, character class's suite of abilities.
Sure.
Um, so is there any other thoughts, any other plots that you would want to throw out there for people to maybe use in their games?
So I mean, there's always lots of things that can be done. We talked, about a variety of ideas, and if I were to sit here, I could just like keep coming up with lists, and whether you're looking at you know the the aspect of, well, I want, the villain wants to be immortal, and by conquering death, that's how it'll be, or everyone should be immortal, and that's why I'm conquering death. It's the same, the same, you know start point, but different different outlooks. I know, like in our game, the villain was, trying to rewrite the world so that, like, they were the end all be all of power. And if somebody were to, like, well, I'm going to control death, therefore I can never die, and anybody that opposes me, I can just make die. Like, that becomes incredibly, hard to fight against, because it's like, all right, well, anybody who puts up any kind of effort, he can wave his hand and up comes the Reapers, and they claim the people, and there's not a whole lot you can do if death comes for you. Um, but the concept of death can go further, of like, well, you know, again, I kind of go back to that point of what souls are. So, like, what if you're all of this is happening because there is something in the underworld, and you have to, uh, gather enough soul energy around you to be able to survive going through there. And it could be, oh, they just want to have a last conversation with a long lost departed, or like maybe they're looking to make a connection to, like, an ancient, like, long gone ancestor, because they knew about some family heirloom, and they're willing to go to absurd lengths just to find this thing, because it's been lost for generations upon generations. Um, and it means that much to somebody in the family. So, like, when you get to the heart and the crux of this whole thing, and it's like, holy shit, that's dark, but holy shit, that's pretty cool. And maybe there's another way to go about, solving the problem. But I like thinking about, new problems and new uses of magic to kind of, get around these things. So, like, stopping death, or controlling death, so that, this aspect of, like a, uh, this is going to be very jokey sounding, but it's not meant to be that way. A solar energy, uh, to travel through the underworld. Because, like, if you, again, go back to the Hercules movie, like when Hercules steps into the underworld, the River of Souls, like, he begins to waste away. It's like, well, the only way you can get there is if you're actually immortal. Uh, Spoiler alert for a 30-year-old movie. Uh, but an aspect of, well, if you surround yourself with that energy, you could then go in and explore those kinds of things. Because speak with dead, you kind of need the dead body, and if they are long since decomposed and there's no bones remaining, there's got to be another way. So that could be the fun, really dark and creepy way to get there. And then you can do some cool things and explore, new locations that you haven't really used before.
Or break out that old Ghost Walk campaign setting you've always wanted to use but haven't had the chance
I,
yet.
I've got my Ghost Walk campaign, and I love that book. And while I probably didn't do it properly, having another 20 years experience, you know, under the belt at this point in time, I think I would do it some pretty good justice if I were to run that now.
Um, Maybe that should be your next D&D in a Castle campaign.
That is an idea.
Like, guys, I've had something I've always wanted to run, and now I have you as a captive audience. You're all dead. Mm.
Yeah, that either go over swimmingly or not at all.
What's the worst case scenario? Um, so do we have any other business to attend before we get out of here tonight?
I've got no admin duties for tonight. We got this is our last one of this month. So next month we'll have some cool or next week we'll have some nice cool giveaways. We already know that we're gonna give away a copy of the new book, Glory of Giants. So this will be flying or mailing out to somebody soon, along with some other goodies that get out to some adoring fans.
Nice. So, if there's any questions in the chat, feel free to ask them. Just a question, in front of it, so we know that you're talking to us. There's a lot of stuff going back and forth. I'm not sure if you guys are talking to us or to each other in the chat sometimes. Um, we, seeing kind of this question, Merc, who's the best cult with death? Makes people think that we haven't really used enough death cults in our game, right? Because usually it's like demon cults, and they featured very largely in your game,
Uh-huh.
um, but no death cults.
No, because I mean, well, I'm certain that every campaign world has a death cult. Um, we haven't really done that kind of quest pattern. I mean, we've done an awful lot of things, but since there are so many options of games that can be run, like it's not really possible to run everything unless you're playing like you know a singular DM running every week or twice a week or what have you. We've got well over 30 years experience each of us, uh, in playing this game. But it's just it's one of those things that you can play your entire life and still not see every game that's out there and see every concept that's out there. I know that there's new monster books coming out all the time with all these third-party things. There's no way to fight everything. There's no way to see every single monster. Um, so you just play the game, you see what's there, and you have fun. And when a cool idea is brought to you by a DM, you play it, and that's how you do it.
So, Vaughn at Nerdarchy, do you feel Undead got weaker as the editions progressed?
Certain undead, have seen seen some problems. I feel while fifth edition has presented the best mechanically, I did feel that um like clerics, which are my favorite, they've got some serious power with their turn undead ability. So yeah, some base undead are a little bit weaker, but if you feel in your world you want to ramp up the undead, all you got to do is turn that dial, man. And undead are a little bit more powerful. You can give zombies,
Yeah,
turning
yeah,
resistance or turning immunity.
yeah, but in previous edition, yeah, Vaughn just that's where I was going. Energy drain, life
Mhm.
drain, loss. Losing levels. When you get hit by certain undead sucked. And
Absolutely.
I think in third edition they changed it to like wasn't automatically permanent, but I think it was
Mhm.
still there.
I
Um,
think, and I'm rambling here, but I believe like you just were incurring negatives, like to hit points and to
it
your
was
to
like a
your to
-1
hits.
across all the
Right,
board, right? Across the board.
right.
But in like second edition and first edition, you got level drain. You just lost the XP and the level,
Yeah.
and it sucked bad.
So that's where I was working towards,
Yeah.
without like just jumping right to the juicy bits, uh, and like it doesn't really fit the 5e feel because like all right, you got level drained unless you were to do like an aura thing, where it hits the entire party and there's not really a save, like, oh well, now we've got unbalanced characters, and which is not a problem because there are people who still play with XP, and oh, you weren't here, well, you clearly aren't going to gain the XP that the other players did because you weren't here. um for us, that's whatever. We don't really care anymore. So that doesn't really fit our current play style. But like I definitely played those games, definitely saw those things and been affected by them, and it sucks.
So I will say like with some with some care, you can take the current undead and make it a little bit scarier without really tweaking anything. Because what a lot of the other undead do now instead of level drain is, you know, they reduce your maximum hit points, and you need a
Mhm.
long rest to reset that. Which it's not that scary because a lot of games just don't have that many encounters throughout the day, and the players are able to go and take a long rest. But if you were to take that scenario and put them in a time crunch where they can't rest, where they're being constantly harried, and they're fighting lots of undead that have the ability to reduce their maximum hit points. Now
Mhm.
that could probably put some of the horror back in it for them. And in some ways, that would be scarier than losing levels, in the sense that when you lose, like, when that would happen, it was just automatic, boom, instantaneous. But like, you could drag it out over a whole session or several sessions where they're kind of like they're trying to figure out how to survive, and how to maybe not fight things and not encounter things because their maximum hit points keep getting whittled down. It's always about taking the mechanics you have and trying to figure out what's the best way to kind of maximize the fun from them or the story elements
Mhm.
from them. Um, so I feel like you could, and also like I will say, shadows in 5e they really
That's where I
suck.
was. That's where I was gonna go, man. Shadows are nothing to sneeze at. They might be low on the undead totem pole for CRs, but man, they can they can hurt real hard because there are plenty of characters who are like, yeah, I'm dumping strength. Really? Okay. Like,
Yeah.
come meet my friends.
Now people are just listing off all the ways to lose XP in older editions.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, yeah, we know those too, and again, we've played with those aspects and those rule sets. So like, if you're looking to have the fear of undead and death, there's certainly ways to incorporate the current rule sets and use it properly, or to kind of tweak things a little bit within the confines of the mechanics. Uh, as Dave says, like, well, maybe not all of the uh, maximum hit point loss is permanent, but what if some of it is? Like, if every time, oh, you roll a d6, all right, well, you rolled a 3, all right, well, 3 of them, you lose three off your max. But when you finish your long rest, all right, well, you get two of them back. But the ones there, one's gone forever because there's always going to be some that
Yeah, but there's also
goes
aspects
in.
of that I just don't miss as a DM or a player,
Mhm.
where it just like it. There was definitely certain points where you just wish your character would have died, right? Like even like I would rather start over than use this character now.
Well, I
So
mean, we had the necromancer of doom, as he liked to call himself in pretty much your first game. He was a seventh level elven necromancer, or whatnot, and he had 14 hit points.
yeah, back in the good old days. Well, with that, we were just past the 9 o'clock hour, so we're gonna wrap things up. We'll be back here Tuesday night, so come hang out with us as we play some Vast Grim. For you folks that are into AD&D in First Edition, it is an OSR style game, so you might like to check that out. You can watch us play. And until next time, stay nerdy.
Stay nerdy.